Oh, no, clamp it to the table.
Yeah, that's a better idea. Okay, sorry.
So,
I'll do that right now.
it's all right. It's okay. I'm just having a little guilt about mansplaining. It's okay. It's all right.
Good.
It's good.
Good. I'm glad that you're
You
feeling
look good.
guilt about that now. I was just feeling totally carefree about it.
Carefree mansplaining.
Carefree mansplaining.
Oh,
maybe that should be the name of your book. I think you found a topic finally. It's something you're an expert in.
I'll just do something like a very condescending look.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, we're back.
Hey, we are. I mean, we never left. We've always been here, but we are back.
True. That's
For
true.
fans.
We're back.
Hey, fans. For thousands of fans who are listening to this. We appreciate you all.
With so much gratitude. I can listen. I can hear them. I can hear them cheering. The stadiums. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Wow.
because
My imagination is
podcasts
good.
fill stadiums.
They do. Well, people are earning $20 million for recording podcasts nowadays.
What's that for? Per podcast?
For like
That's
a
a lot.
year, $20 million a year.
Who are these
Like-
people?
The Who's Your Daddy podcast, young woman. I think Joe Rogan probably makes something like that. He's like the
Yeah.
top podcaster in the world. So,
There's hope
way
for
to
us.
start with a hook. That's a good
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just saw that Reese Witherspoon sold her production company for $900 million. Did you see that?
hook. No. And Reese Witherspoon
900.
had a production company.
Yeah, exactly.
Does she produce all her amazing TV and
Yeah. I mean, that's
morning
kind of
show?
what yeah. She paid,
Oh.
her company, Hello Sunshine, produced The Morning Show, Little Fires Everywhere, Big Little Lies.
Oh, wow. Well done.
It's all about female voices. But $900 million. That's 100 short of $1 billion is what that is, folks. Sometimes I'm like, what is $1 billion? It's 1,000 million. And I think that's probably what they were going for.
Could you just refer to $1 billion as 1,000 million in the future as much as possible, please? Like, what are your goals? You're like, I want to be 1,000 millionaire.
Exactly. Yeah, so she got close to $1,000 million for
That's
that production
amazing.
company.
Well done, Reese.
Yeah.
I really like her acting. I like her as a person.
Yeah,
I don't know her at
those
all.
are two different things.
But I'm just someone who watches movies, so
Yes. I also like her.
assume-
That she's
go ahead.
nice.
Yeah.
Well,
because her characters are, her characters are
Could
lots
be
of
her
different things.
Right. That could be her
bursting
acting.
my bubble. Feels like a Santa Claus moment a little bit.
Oh,
It's all right.
But I haven't
I'll
heard
get through
anything
this.
terrible about her. As somebody who works in the business, I have not heard horror stories
Oh.
about Reese. Except she had that flip out with the. Do you remember that when she got pulled over
No.
for drunk driving and she yelled at the cop like, "Do you know who I am?" Like literally yelled that to him. But that was a few years ago. I don't know the context. Other than
Okay.
that, I saw the video, so there's quite a bit of context.
Oh, really?
But,
like a body cam
yeah.
of Reese Witherspoon?
Good question. I don't remember how the video surfaced. It was a while ago. But anyway, other than that, I haven't heard anything about her. And I just started watching The Morning Show, and I really like it.
Oh, really? Oh, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Season 2 is coming
good.
out.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really great. Fantastic.
Exciting.
Okay, perfect segue. Surrender. Yeah.
Totally natural.
Totally
segue.
natural. Yeah, just flowed right into it.
Yeah.
Surrender. We're kind of surrendering to the segue that didn't
We
exist.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
We
it's
could
pretty
probably
meta.
dissect how the characters on The Morning Show are surrendering or not surrendering as well.
This is good. This is good. So should I start with what I've been thinking about with surrender?
Yes, please.
And see what you've got?
Tell
Okay.
me. Yeah.
So I was thinking about surrender, and I think there's there's a number of layers to this. Let's start with one layer. One layer is like, how do I relate to surrender? And there's the kind of classic, I think, spiritual surrender, which is surrendering to like a higher power or our inner self or God. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So I was trying to think of like a practical applicable definition of surrender. And what I came up with is that surrender is about doing the best that we can with commitments that we make. So meaning like I surrender to commitments. So like today, for example, I was not feeling like I wanted to record any videos for some content that we're creating, with our organization. And I didn't want to at all, but I just surrendered to this like commitment that I made, which was recording videos. So I put myself into a state, I did the things, I did what I had to do. And I didn't do as well as I would have liked, but I did it was a nice practice of surrender, because surrender, I know in like the general public eye means giving up, right? In a lot of ways, which I don't.
White flag, waving the white flag.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of war or something. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And there's this one cool story actually that I'll just tell that I thought was really good. It was from about 17 years ago. I was a field guide working at a wilderness therapy company. And I was super arrogant and thought I was the best thing that had ever happened to field guiding. And my supervisor at the time told me in the week that I went out to work with these folks in recovery from addiction. They're great young adults. And I was working with them for a week, and I'd spend a week living in the backcountry with them. And she said, I just want you to assist the person in charge, like the senior guide. And I just want you to observe, to assist, and to play like a backseat role. Well, of course, because I was the person that I was back then, I didn't do that at all. And I just took over the whole week and did what I felt was like a really kick-ass job with these clients. And so we came back afterwards, and I had totally usurped my co-field guide's power and her role, and just took over in a really douchey kind of way. And I was out in this meeting with her, my supervisor, and the kind of program manager. And he said, I'm going to tell you, they asked me what had happened, and I said I just couldn't stop myself. Like, I really wanted to do a good job. And I had all these justifications around why I had clearly, not done what I had committed to doing and what I'd been asked to do. And he said, I'll tell you the story. And he said, well, and I'm not going to get the names of whatever he said, right? Because there has to be with historical figures.
Wow. So
but
this is a story within a story right now.
Story within a story. It's a little
cool.
It's a little bit of Inception. So the story is that at the end of the Civil War, whoever was in charge of the North was sitting in a meeting with whoever was in charge of the South. Was it Ulysses S. Grant in the North?
And Lee?
Lee? I think it was Lee, actually.
Lee is of the South.
Grant and Lee.
Confederacy.
Yes,
the
Union
Union and the Confederacy, I'm pretty sure.
That's correct. All right. This has really come together. So they're sitting in a meeting, and Lee, let's say, just in our historical nonfiction here, says, I want all of my horses from my men. And Grant says, this is an unconditional surrender. And Lee says, I want all my men to be freed, and then I'll surrender. And then Grant says, this is an unconditional surrender. And he keeps saying this. And finally, it's just very clear that Lee is not going to get what he wants. And Grant says, this is unconditional surrender. I refuse to take any of your conditions. And then Lee just kind of puts his head down and whatever emotion that is, apathy, giving up. And then Grant said, and then they signed the documents, and he had surrendered and the South had lost. And then Grant said, now let's talk about those horses. I thought it was really great, right? And he told me this story, and I was like, oh. And because I felt really ashamed and totally awful, as I should have, because I think I made my coworker feel terrible the whole week. But it really stuck with me around surrender, like an unconditional surrender. And when we surrender to, I think for me, commitments, then we get what we want, right? Or we fulfill our commitment, which might be like getting what we had wanted because we'd committed to something, right? So I remember that story because it helped me feel so empowered in the energy of surrender and what that actually means, as opposed to giving up and losing. It means gaining, you know?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, I look at it in a very different way, but before I talk about that, I think that's really interesting, because what I hear in what you're saying is that it's almost like, if you think about what a commitment is, it's a declaration we make often when we're in our highest, right? So we're in our highest state. I mean, that's maybe
good.
not across the board. That's not what all commitments are. But if you think about like the ideal of a commitment, it's that there is we're embodying like the highness of our highest in ourselves, and that we declare something and make a commitment.
Right.
And that then, so for example, with the videos, right, that's in alignment for you to be making those videos. But then in the moment, resistance may come up, all the other procrastination or laziness. Myself, I was just like, I just want to lie on the couch and not get up right now. So bad, right? Sure. And that's why, raise your hand if you want to lay up on the couch and not get up. So bad. All hands raised. So, but I think what you're saying then is that it's like, who am I honoring, or what am I surrendering to? Am I surrendering to that force inside myself that is lethargic in the moment, or am I surrendering to my commitment, which is something I made as a declaration of my highest purpose or my highest goal?
That's fantastic.
Well, that's what you said.
That's I love it. I love
you
me.
Love it.
I love myself. I love myself. I love myself.
It's like, that's such a great idea. Oh, it was my idea. That's why I loved it so much.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's really
that.
good.
It's so interesting because I look at it so, and I think in this conversation about, we just chose a topic and decided to talk about surrender. Right. And then I think we live our lives and look at it through the lens of that topic. And for me, it's been coming up in a very different way. It's so interesting also the masculine and the feminine, I think, between us. Because what I've been seeing in my life and in my career is this theme of highs and lows, tragedies and triumphs, sorrow and joy, and how the duality of the spinning of the earth of creation is always happening simultaneously. And that the bigger the game is that we're playing, the more pronounced that is, I can see. Like the timing of those things. So, for example, I recently opened an office of my production company in Los Angeles, and the team was there. We have a beautiful outdoor area with a pool. We don't have any furniture really in the house yet, but they were sitting outside at folding tables and folding chairs, and they popped a bottle of champagne. They were so thrilled that we're embarking on this new chapter. They just started this job. They're outside celebrating, toasting champagne, and I'm toasting champagne with them, and then I get a phone call, and I have to go inside, and during that phone call, I'm firing a member of my company in New York, right? Which had to happen, and it just happened to be that the timing worked out that way. And that person is so wonderful. It's such a great personality. It's just in the role, wasn't working out with her. Right. And so I was sitting inside having this conversation, like dropping this bombshell on her and everything that was doing emotionally to her, and then as a result to me. And I look out the window and their heads are thrown back drinking champagne outside. And I'm just like, this is leadership, or this is life. Like, this is just how it is that these things exist at the same time, almost like a Martin Scorsese movie, like the same time people are like in a casino, like winning money, somebody's getting like bludgeoned to death in an alley, right? It's like that's in there intercutting between those two things. It's like, that's life. And for me anyway, the point of all this is, for me, surrender is being in that middle space, is being in that pillar inside of myself where I'm surrendering and just being like aligned in that center place, and not getting pulled into the celebration or the desecration, whatever you want to call it, into either one of those too much, and being in that middle space inside. I find that more and more for me, that's where surrender lives. Wow.
So how is that surrender like in action? Like, how do you get in touch with that part? There's like a piece missing from my understanding around how you're relating to surrender in that pillar. Like, is it like, how do you get access to it? Like, what's the action? I'm almost there, but it's not totally clicking yet. I get the that state of that being, the beingness of it that you're describing. How does surrender like give you access to that?
Yeah,
or
let me
maybe that's
think
not the
of
right
it.
question to ask.
No, I get
exactly
exactly what you're saying. I get exactly what you're saying. Like, why do I relate to that also as surrender?
Yes,
right? I can
exactly.
relate to that as something else. But for me,
Right.
it is surrender, because
I
there
love it.
is why is that surrender? Is that what your
Yeah,
question is?
that's exactly
in a
it.
sense?
Yes, exactly.
Why is that surrender? Because I feel like for me, surrender is this, it's like the alignment with my highest purpose. It's so connected with like faith and trust and all of that as well.
Yeah,
So then when all of these things are happening, I have to just surrender and be like, you know what? This is all going to work itself out. Or this is all this is all part of it. And that's what it's interesting for me, because surrender, we typically think of surrender as an action,
Right.
maybe, but I'm thinking
Yes.
of it as a state. It's a state that lives inside of me of surrender, which is when all of this is boiling around me. And I can't tell you, like, it just happens all the time now. Like, celebrating something and then somebody tells me they're quitting. And it's like all the emotions inside of me that like bubble up from all of that. It's like that state of surrender is inside is like, well, it just is. It just is. And this is it. It's okay. Or it's all part of it. That's how it lives for me. Is there anything in that makes sense?
Yes.
To you?
Now I totally get it, because for me, I have the same experience when I have something that I'm really looking forward to and it doesn't happen. Or like there was something that we had, like there was a call that we had scheduled or a plan that we had scheduled that then stopped happening. And I remember the experience of finding out that that you and I and some others were going on this trip. And I was like, well, that's going to be great. But I sort of didn't let myself like get excited per se, not in like a bad way, but just like I was more in the state of the beingness of like, that'll be fantastic. And then it didn't happen. And I wasn't crushed. Like it was like, that's okay too, you know? And one thing that sort of relates to that's the way that I relate to surrender and the way that you're talking about it, which I love because I haven't lived it in that way consciously, is surrendering to like a yes. Like being a yes is really similar to the surrender for me, is like saying yes to what's happening without me feeling like it's not like I'm just going along with things. I'm a yes to what's happening, like accepting what's happening. And then there's that yes has an impact on my state. For example, with the kids that I work with in the wilderness, these boys, similar to you, I was relating to how like one boy will be totally melting down about something outrageous. And another boy will be like, I am doing amazing. I love my life and my parents. And the other boy is saying the exact opposite, if there could be an exact opposite of that statements. And so how I am in that is like, okay, great. You know, great. You love your life. You hate your life. You know, I'm going to supply some support to each one of you. And I wonder if surrender is also like the absence of resistance. Right?
Yes, I want to just rip this mic off my desk and drop it, because I was thinking the same thing leading up to this conversation. I really think this surrender is the absence of resistance. I really agree. Wow. Yes.
It's not necessarily adding anything to an experience. It's the dearth of resistance, of like, I don't want to, of like, I don't like this. I don't want to have to like fire my employee. I don't want to have to deal with this young man who's roiling in the mud and the dirt like a child, right? Or whatever, right? Whatever it may be. But just the lack of like, oh, God. Like without that, it's just like, okay, let's do something. Do this or not do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I would ask you then, okay, let's get a little deeper. This is the advanced level of that. So what is then the difference between surrender and acceptance? Yeah,
great. So let's think about this. So surrender for me, it has to do with it's contingent on utter and complete trust and faith that all is well in the universe and I am full and whole as a person. And I feel like there's nothing left in me when I'm in the state of surrender. Like I'm just totally empty. And I become the movement of life itself. And there's no separation between who I think I am and what life is in its essence. Whereas I think acceptance has to do with something. Like it has to do with like, okay, it's like, it feels like it's almost like a, not as deep. It's still very powerful, acceptance. But acceptance is more like, okay, I just need to accept that this is happening and accept this. Okay, I accept that, right? And it's like, okay, it's like a little bit more practical. And I think it gives us access to surrender, to that real experience of life, of God, of self, right? And acceptance is more like a practical, like almost, like a stepping stone, I think, into the state of surrender, like you've talked about.
Yeah. I
what do you think?
Agree. Yeah, I agree with that, because I think like acceptance is almost conditional. Like I'm accepting something, and it's more quotidian, if you want to say that, like in part of your everyday life, or like I'm accepting something that's happening right now. Yeah. And I feel like surrender is like the totality of that. Right. The totality of acceptance. Like, yes, the totality of yesness or acceptance as a totality and as of a state. You know, and I think that there is that, it's almost like, what's the nuance there? It's like I'm accepting something, but I'm also, surrender implies to me that there is a surrendering to something as well. But they're different. Like I see like acceptance is like I'm accepting something in this transactional way, and surrender is like I am giving all that I am up to something bigger, right? And I think this is why it gets complicated for people, because I think surrender, sure, it has to do with war, and you never want to be on the losing side of a war, right? It's not something that anybody wants, to be on the losing side of anything typically. Right. And then also I think when it comes to the spiritual realm, we have this idea of like I'm surrendering, I'm giving all of my power over to this person or a guru. And I was thinking about this actually. I was thinking about, okay, what's an example of that in my own life? You know, I think that people are like, well, I don't want to give all my power over to this guru. They're like, then I'm not going to have anything left. And I just think about that as being kind of like, let's say you're like Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney or something, or like that. And there's like a runner at the, Pixar or whatever, who's like a production assistant who just started, who's like, I don't know, I don't want to give my power over to Bob Iger, who has $1,000 million and is running all these companies. Like, Bob Iger doesn't need your power, PA. Like, no offense. I'm sure you're full of amazingness, but like, in the business world, that would be a ridiculous thing to think. Like that somebody in his position would need that person's power. But I think it's very similar with spiritual teachers. Like we're like, I don't want to give my power over to this person who has access to all of creation. Like, okay, that's nice. It's like, that's sweet, but they don't need that. They don't need your power like that. So I think like, there's a lot to dissect also in terms of like the stigma around surrender, right? Yes. We're talking about the pure state of surrender because we're both like, we're yeses to that kind of thing. But I think there's also probably, and I don't know if people's listening or people out there, like how you think about surrender and if that is something that like is a bad word or if that's something that's an empowering word for you.
Totally. I love that. And as you were talking, these words came to me, that surrender is the death of limitation. Whoa. I think it's the death of limitation. That the state of surrender is the end of limitation. Because you were talking about war, and I was thinking about, well, like in war, people don't want to die, right? Well, they don't want to die or they don't want to lose whatever they're fighting for, right? Whatever it's their country or whatever it may be. And so when I think of like war, like spiritual, like what surrender is actually the death of limitation. But we identify as limitation because of our personalities and our
going.
ego, right? And we identify as our bodies, as our thoughts, as our feelings, as our roles, and so when we identify with that, then surrender becomes an obstacle as opposed to a goal, right?
Wow. Yeah. Well, exactly. And it's that whole thing around the ego, right? The ego,
Right.
whatever you want to call the duality, the ego and the soul, or what would you call that duality between the ego and the what?
Self? I don't know.
Self.
Yeah. Ego and
Okay.
self.
So, like,
Sure.
if you are the ego, then
Yeah.
surrender is a terrible thing because it's the dissolution of the ego is what you're
Right.
basically. The dissolution of limitation is the dissolution of the ego,
Right.
which is death, which is what
Right.
is always that part of us that's always fighting against that. The part of us
Right.
that wants to lie on the couch and not give ourselves over to the highest.
Right.
But if we're talking about then surrender as like the giving of ourselves to the highest fully, I mean, there's really no higher act that we
Yeah.
can do inside of ourselves
Yeah.
than surrender. And it does become, I feel like, if we can live in that surrender inside and then action on the outside.
Yes.
So like a chewy nougat in the inside is surrender, but on the outside we're full of action in life. It's not like we're just, the surrender is on the inside though. It's like it really frees us from limitation, it frees us from suffering, it frees us from all the things that can come from just living in this world of duality with all of its traumas and tragedies and all of that kind of stuff.
God, that's so great. That's so great.
We are the river.
Yeah. Then there was one other thought I just wanted to name. What was it? That I think that, again, that like a lot of people don't relate to surrender in the way that we do because people don't have the access to the experience of the self within, right? And I think going back to like the guru or the spiritual teacher or a relationship to God or even like religion, there is, with people that don't have access to that higher self, or we could even say higher purpose, the experience of the higher purpose or the higher self, then surrender doesn't exist as something that's beautiful or that is a goal or something to achieve, right? Or feel or experience, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. This is just the
Yeah.
ellipses of this conversation happening right now. Just,
Well, I'm in this state. I feel like wow, tapped
Yeah.
into being in that state of surrender. Yeah.
Yeah.
And getting out of, I think it's also like getting out of my own way. Like,
Nice.
because, I feel very strongly, because we're close friends and I talk about this, but there is a force in me that feels to me that it's emerging and coming into existence. And this is like the becoming, right? Michelle Obama wrote a book called Becoming, and I love that word. It's like there is a force inside of us that's unfolding and evolving. And I think we can be aware of it and we can allow it, or we can resist it, we can shut it down. And I think I feel so much that there is a force moving through me in terms of what I'm here to do and my purpose and the work I'm here for. And so my relationship to surrender then is very specific to that. And saying, okay, well, this could be happening. This person can be leaving. Another person is coming. It's surrendering to all of that. It's saying yes to all of that. And then the specifics in the moment, not being attached to any of them.
Yes. I love that. It's that river. You're the river, and the things that, there are bends and rapids and waterfalls, and there are different experiences, but you're in the movement of your purpose in the same way that I feel like I am as well, right? That there's just like, we're just in the movement of our purpose and living that purpose and expressing that purpose and being in action, and then becoming the state that is the movement that is also the surrender at the same time. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right.